Okay. So in episode 6 of season 2, we got to see one of the most interesting scenes in the entire series. And that was, of course, when Boyd ran out of the hospital and he infected one of the monsters with the worms. And because of that, we're getting way closer into understanding what the worms represent and what their capabilities are than we ever were before. We're getting closer to understanding who and why put Martin, the old man, in the dungeon. The monsters didn't recognize the worms. So you need to keep in mind that when Boyd was in the dungeon, Martin told Boyd to kill him before they arrive. Remember that, remember that. If the worms are the weakness for the monsters, why was Martin telling him over and over, kill me, just kill me, blah, 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 you get the point. That implies to us, as a reader, that he didn't want to give Boyd the worms. It's still a bit up in the air because we haven't seen Boyd getting possessed by the worms. We haven't seen them taking control of his body. So it's still up in the air whether or not the monsters that Martin was referring to are the worms themselves. It seemed that what happened when Martin gashed Boyd on the shoulder was that he got controlled by the worms and the worms wanted to get out of the dungeon. That was my interpretation of that scene, but until we see the results of what Boyd ended up doing to the monster itself, or Boyd getting possessed, it's really hard to tell if putting the worms in the monster is a bad idea or a good idea, and why Martin wanted to die before giving Boyd the worms. The fact that somebody chained him up and didn't just kill him implies that Martin was necessary to those monsters who put him there, or they couldn't kill him at all if he has the worms. It implies one of those two things. But let's just assume that the worms kill the monsters that we know about, the ones that come out of the woods in the night. Could it be that Martin was being kept alive in the dungeon all those years or decades or centuries in order for them to farm the worms? What if they kept him in there so that they themselves would have infinite access to the worms? A never ending supply of ammo that can kill the monsters. You see? That would make sense if those new monsters hate the monsters we know for some reason. I've also talked about this before, but crows were very prominent in the first season. If these monsters are somehow connected to the crows, it could be some sort of irony that in this show, when birds eat worms, they get poisoned and they die. But in the real world, we know that birds, they really love eating worms. So it could be some sort of irony that they made it that way so that us as the viewers can see that dynamic. And it also seems as if the worms are providing some sort of immortality to the host because of what Boyd said about Martin in episode 6. But we have no idea how that works. Is it infinite regeneration no matter the injury, or is it that they won't die from natural causes regardless of how much time passes by? And considering that Martin said, "My blood is your blood," when he passed them on to Boyd, is it necessary to say that in order for you to pass them on? Because it seemed like it was when Boyd infected the monster. He said the same thing. So if you don't say, "My blood is your blood," are the monsters still gonna be passed on? Because it definitely seems like some sort of magic is going on there, but it's really hard to say. And for the idea that the worms prevent you from dying somehow, it makes me wonder if there could be a FROMLAND resident who's been there from the beginning of it all. Maybe that's the guy who put the bottles in the forest, someone who's been living here in FROMLAND for centuries after centuries because of the worms. That would actually be a great way to get answers about everything about this place, how it came to be, and to explain the dynamics of how it works. Because the only other way for those bottles that Boyd and Sarah found in the woods to have been set up there would be to have a tribe of people who've been living in Fromland for a really long time, and they have some sort of tradition to put up bottles on the tree to signify something we don't know. When Boyd confronted Smiley, all those other monsters were just watching. They didn't do anything. But at the same time, none of them mentioned the worms. And even after that, Smiley tried to attack Boyd, but he had a reaction, supposedly because of the worms. It gives off the idea that the monsters don't know about the worms or its effects, which is really weird because it makes it seem like the worms aren't a part of the world. It reminds me kind of like a cheat code or a mod in a video game. If you mod Skyrim, for example, to give yourself an RPG or Amaterasu, the AI won't have a way of countering you because it's not something that the programmers and the developers intended. So you're gonna have a really overpowered character or overpowered ability that the NPCs can't defend against. What if the worms are the same way? Somebody implanted them into FROMLAND to give the residents a way to fight back. Another explanation could simply be that Martin was hiding the worms for so many centuries that these monsters we see currently on the show, they're so young that they've never been exposed to them, that they've never seen the worms. They've never seen the worms before, so they never even knew that they could be killed at all. If the people who captured Martin were human, it'd be easy to say that they captured him so that they'd have an infinite supply of worms because the worms are the weakness of the monsters. But with the way Martin was talking about those people, it made them sound really demonic. It made them sound really inhuman, you know? So I don't know, but you could still twist it. If you have a good writer, you could easily just twist that into being some sort of uh, worshippers of FROMLAND or something that are really, they really hate humanity, so they enjoy torturing them or something. You could definitely twist it into that. But from what we know, it sounds like they are another form, another type of monster that we haven't seen yet in the show. There's so many interesting ideas. The worms are very mysterious and the possibilities are endless. And I really want to see how they explain it. It's also fascinating to consider that what if the worms are a way for the monsters to get some sort of upgrade? And the reason why Martin was chained up in the dungeon was to prevent him from giving these monsters an upgrade. You know, hiding the worms down there in the dungeon so that the monsters that come out at night would never be able to get upgraded, you know? The possibilities, man, it's there's so many of them, you know? Because that would be terrifying because we know what Boyd just did and what that would mean for the people of Fromland or Fromville is terrifying to consider. But anyways, thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next video. Peace.